Each season, summer, fall, and winter, spring, the Loft schedules a huge variety of writing classes. Today, I'm thrilled to introduce one of our fiction instructors, Maria Barrios. Maria, could you introduce yourself and tell us how you got involved with the Loft?
Hi, everyone. I'm thrilled to be here. My name is Maria, and I am a fiction writer from Colombia. I currently live in Brooklyn, and I love writing short stories and short fiction. And I got involved with the Loft through submitting a proposal, which was very exciting because I heard a lot of students talking great things about the Loft and how the Loft had been like such an important place for the writing. So I was just thrilled to submit and get my proposal accepted.
I want to start by talking a little bit about your own writing because you specialize in writing short fiction.
Mm-hmm.
So can you talk a little bit about how you approach flash fiction? So for our viewers who don't know, that's 1,000 words or less, differently from say like a 5,000 word short story.
Mm-hmm. So one of the things that it's like pivotal for my writing is experimentation. And one of the reasons why I love flash so much is because it allows us to like get into the world very quickly and build a window to someone's life in like a very short space. So I love doing that in experimental forms, like forms that are not non-linear, and experimenting ways of establishing the world and the voice early. In terms of short fiction, I love doing that, but in like a more sustained, longer way. That's also like very, very exciting. And I also like love how playful both forms can be. So I enjoy that a lot.
You mentioned playfulness and loving to jump into the world, but in a more content basis, where does the inspiration for your work generally come from?
I think for me, I take a lot from where I come from. So I come from Colombia, and so that both the women in my family are a huge inspiration for me, and sort of like the experiences they went through. And also something that I've been playing a lot around with is magical realism. So I come from Latin America, and I grew up with a lot of stories by Gabriel Garcia Marquez, Isabel Allende. But I also like grew up a lot with stories about ghosts, fables, legends, and we Colombians, we love all that kind of stuff, and we are also very religious, so that adds an element of mysticism and mystery that I think comes a lot in my writing and that I love implementing as well.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up magical realism. It's a term that I think a lot of people don't understand the root of and don't understand that it's like a very Latin and South American subgenre specifically. Do you just want to explain a little bit more about that for readers who might not be familiar, who might think it's like equivalent to light fantasy maybe?
I would love to. So magical realism is a term that originated in Latin America and is described to use to define writing that has magical elements. So for example, like levitating people, flying chairs, ghosts that move a table, but where this world is not necessarily explained. So there is rules to the world and magical things happen, but it's not necessarily like the author is gonna be like, oh, this is why there's ghosts, or this is why like the chair is flying. It just happens, and it's a thing in this world, which I find very exciting as a reader, and also someone who likes to write in this form.
Absolutely. I'm going to switch gears a little bit to talk about you as, a teacher, as an instructor, because you teach at a couple of different places along with the Loft. So I'm curious about what drew you into teaching originally.
So in Colombia, I used to be a history teacher. That's my what I studied in college and sort of like what I specialized in. And I love the experience of bringing Colombian history to my students, but then doing it in a way that was interesting and different for them. So like not only like talking about like, oh, this is what happened, this is this war and that war, but more like doing projects or like talking about the art, studying primary sources and looking at photographs and sort of like doing projects with that. And I love the creativity and that comes with teaching, and sort of like presenting the format in a way that it's new and fun and more hands-on. So when I started writing more seriously, taking classes, learning about it, I thought like, oh, I would love, as someone who learns a little bit more by doing than by listening, I thought like, wow, it would be so cool to actually like implement these projects and like group projects, or doing exercises that are a little bit different, like taking them into the classroom and having like students collaborate or play around with like experimental forms and try their own hand and doing things a little bit less, I don't know, traditional classroom style.
I'm glad you brought that up, that, playing around with different forms, because one of the things that you specify is that you love teaching generative classes. And
Mm-hmm.
for a lot of our students, I think this is the most daunting part, right? Just generating the content, just getting started. So can you just talk a little bit about exercises that you use to help really spark creativity that feel accessible for people who maybe haven't written before?
Yeah, so one of the things that I love doing, especially because I love reading so much, and I love reading contemporary authors of color that are like working writers right now, is that I love bringing up examples and sort of like lending those forms. So we read the example, for example, one exercise that I love lately is that we read a couple of stories that are written in like advice column format, which is like a format that it's recognized by everyone, right? And then those formats are usually very voicey, which can be like something that it's daunting to start, like, oh, how do I do a story that has like a character that has a voice from the get-go? But epistolary forms have that, like we, without like maybe realizing it, we write in like a very voicey way. So we read a couple of stories and then we try our own, and the stories that come out from that exercise are usually so fun but also deep, because like people want to like get to the root of a problem. So exercises like that.
Yeah, that sounds like a ton of fun.
Mm-hmm.
And then sort of regardless of what your class is focusing on, if your students can walk away with one thing, what do you hope that is?
So I think for me lately, I've been thinking a lot about the power of finishing, especially imperfect first drafts, if you will, because I think in those first drafts is where we find the story that we want to tell. And even if it's daunting or scary, or we have like a ton of self-doubt, just like getting over the fear and finishing. And there's so much value in that, because sometimes like there's so many stories that we have inside us that don't get told because we're in the way. Obviously for a ton of reasons that are too difficult to discuss right now, but I think like that, if people came out of the class with that idea, I would be super happy, because I think like that's definitely something that took me a while to learn, but it's very valuable.
Yeah, I think that's something that a lot of writers really struggle with. You get something you love down on the page and you're like, oh no, I have to keep working on it.
Yeah. Right.
Oh, we have one more question for you. I have one more question, and it's a little bit more personal.
Mm-hmm.
You aren't teaching or writing. What is it that you really love doing?
Well, besides writing, I love art and watching movies. My students laugh because I'm always like quoting movies or showing them art and stuff like that. But I find it really, really fun and exciting to analyze different forms of storytelling, especially when I don't have to do it. I'm just like appreciating.
Absolutely. Well, for our viewers, you can find Maria's classes as well as our full lineup by visiting loft.org/classes. Maria, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you.